Mike, check 1 2 1 2. So have you ever gone looking for a game that you played as a kid and you finally found it at a retro game store? And when you finally got it in hand and you asked them how much it cost, it was about 5 to 10 times the price you thought it was going to be. Well, that's exactly what happened to me when I went looking for a copy of Ghouls and Ghosts, specifically the version that came out on the 16-bit Sega Genesis. The reason why is because I remember every night as a kid hanging up my clothes, watching this spine label staring back at me, because Ghouls and Ghosts was one of the games that my brother played ad nauseum in the early 90s. And it was because Ghouls and Ghosts was a very difficult game to play. And as many times as he let me play it, I never quite played it enough to get the timing right and to get the feel of the game enough to really even make it past the first part of the first stage of the game. And so I want to say roughly sometime between 2021 and 2022, I went looking for a complete in-box copy. I did have a copy of it, but I wanted to have the complete in-box copy because this is the condition I remember it in back in 1992. And so I went to a game store to look for the game. And when I got there, I found this copy of Ghouls and Ghosts, and they wanted roughly $100 for it. Maybe not 100. Maybe they wanted like $80 for it or $85 for it. And even at that price, I was just floored because, I mean, it's not like I hadn't been looking at the price of Ghouls and Ghosts. The last few times I had looked, maybe a couple years prior, Ghouls and Ghosts might have been going for maybe $40, 30 to $40, which to me, I was like, okay, 30, $40, I could do that for a copy of Ghouls and Ghosts, because at the time I was really into the Dreamcast and I had just bought a copy of like Marvel vs. Capcom 2 for maybe like $70 or $80. And I was just floored at the price, and I couldn't believe how much the price had gone up. And it really had me wondering why. And the same reason why this price went up is the same reason that I think retro games moving forward, we're not going to see their price ever return back to the 2010 levels. And when I say 2010 levels, back in 2010, most games were probably 60% cheaper. Most retro games were about 60 to maybe 70% cheaper than they are today. And there's really one main reason for it. When you think back to like 2010, right? 2009, 2008, 2010, we were coming out of a great recession. There was a massive recession that we were coming out of because of an incredibly inflated housing market. And when the housing bubble burst, it sent a shockwave throughout the US economy, and it severely impacted things like interest rates. And we saw the big struggle in that time frame with people just trying to find the money to buy some of their most basic necessities. And video games, even an amazing game, a complete in-box game like Lightning Force, even a game like this was not at top of mind. But sometime between 2000 and I want to say 8 or 9 and 2015, the economy started to rebound again, and we started to see interest rates. And I'm talking about housing interest rates. And you're going to say, well, Y2K, what kind of correlation are you trying to make here? Stick with me. I'm going to make it quick. In that time, interest rates started to go back up to the 4%, 5% level or so. And I remember, like, in that time, that was where you started to see game prices start to go back up again somewhat. But then sometime around like 2015, 2016, we saw a big drop in interest rates again. And it was a very opportune time to purchase a home. And it was in that window between 2013 and 2016, 17-ish, that I actually purchased property because of how great the rates were. And then we started to see where rates started to kind of like hold steady in the 3% range. And then they slowly started to tick up to the 4% range or so. And they were starting to bump up and bump up. And what I noticed is that I looked at price charting data for video games and their prices in that time frame. And what I noticed is that there is a correlation between times when interest rates are low and times when interest rates are high. And typically what I saw just looking at price charting data, and I looked at about 25% of the games in my collection just to see if they all had a similar trend. And what I noticed is that somewhere between 2010 and 2014, 13-ish was when game prices were their lowest in the last like 20 years. But then what I noticed is like around 2015, there's this massive spike, like there's this big jump in game prices. And what I noticed is that around that time was when interest rates were some of their lowest at that time. They were roughly around 3% or so, and the economy was doing good and money was cheap. Buying money, the cost to borrow money was very cheap. I say buy money. Buy, borrow is kind of the same thing, because when you take out a loan, you're basically buying money. That's what you're doing. You're buying it at an interest rate. The price you pay for the money you're buying is your interest rate. Call it borrowing, call it buying, whatever, it's the same thing. And that was one of the more inexpensive times to buy money or borrow money. And I noticed that because there was much more of a free flow of money, the prices of games were a bit higher. Now we fast forward over into 2020, right? And at this time, interest rates are maybe in the 4s or so. And then what happens? We hit 2020 and out of nowhere, we see this massive drop in interest rates. And interest rates hit a record low of about 2.5 to 2.6%. I think at one point, some folks were getting interest rates super low. And you say, why 2K? Why does that matter? Pardon me, I'm having my morning coffee here. It matters because if you look at price charting from most of your favorite games, just pause the video right now. Go to GameEye, go to price charting, and look up 10 games, 10 of your most favorite games. You will see that they spiked between 2021 and 2022. And 2021 to 2022 was when it was the cheapest to buy/borrow money. In fact, money was just being given away. They had a thing called helicopter money. Money was just dropping in everyone's lap. Everyone was getting free money, whether it be via stimulus, whether it be via PPP loan, whether it be from a tax credit for a child incentive tax credit, whatever you want to call it, free money was flowing everywhere. And that's where you saw the spike. That's where everything bumped up, bounced up, and has been crazy. Now, here's why I think that not only will prices never go back down to 2010 levels, but I think this is just the beginning, and I think you're going to see prices do another huge spike again. Why do you say that, Y2K? Well, interest rates have been higher than they've been in the last 20 years, and they've been that way for at least maybe about a year now. Right now, most interest rates are going above 7%, 7.5, 7.65%. And money is tighter than it's ever been. It's difficult to get money. The employment market is tough. A lot of the stimulus programs have ended. And we're all feeling the pinch. And even with everyone feeling the pinch, prices for these games have still held true for a lot of them. They've only taken about a 15 to 20% dip. And I don't think they're going to dip much lower. But here's what I do think is going to happen. I don't think interest rates and the economy is going to stay at this level for a long time. And I'm not a finance guru. I'm not a finance guy. I'm not a CPA, but I understand finances because I buy assets. I own assets. And so I got to kind of I have to keep an eye on some of these things just to kind of gauge where I'm going and what I'm going to be doing with some of my investments. And I think that there is going to come a point where interest rates drop down again. It's going to be very cheap to buy and borrow money again. And when that happens, you are going to see the prices for things like collectibles, retro games, they're going to shoot right back up again. Now, here's the catch. Here's the catch. Don't think that just because your games shoot up in value, it means that, or they shoot up in price, that it means that they've gone up in value. Because when these prices for these games shoot up, at the same time, the value of the dollar is also going to be going down. So while it might look nice on paper that your copy of Metal Warriors loose cart is now going for $1,000, it's going to take more dollars to buy that copy of Metal Warriors. So you might say, Y2K, where are you going with this? I think that if you have pieces in your collection that are high value, that are, that are more valuable, top dollar, I would recommend that you keep those, because I think in the future, it's going to cost you more dollars to buy those games. Because your dollar's not going to be worth as much. And when it becomes easier to buy and borrow money, things like collectibles, one-to-one items that are rare or finite, are going to be more difficult to attain because of the cost. But these are just my thoughts based on some minimal research that I've been doing, looking at my collection and using GameEye. I'm interested to know what you think. Do you think that the prices of games will ever return back to 2010 levels? Or do you think that we're just sitting on a powder keg and these things are going to shoot even higher than we've seen before? Let me know down in the comments. It's an interesting thought on a Sunday morning as I sip my coffee here. I'm the Y2K Collector. Take it easy.